Hello everyone. In today's video, I want to talk about how to approach reading the Silmarillion. So, if you start out in reading Tolkien by reading The Hobbit or The Lord of the Rings, those are traditional narrative stories. They have an arc that follows a standard story and a standard novel, and so it's fairly logical for us to read those and understand that just like we would read any other story. The Silmarillion is not a traditional narrative story. It doesn't follow that model at all, and because of that, if you come in with the wrong expectations, you may just give up on reading the Silmarillion, which is what I did on my first attempt. I went in first reading The Lord of the Rings, then reading The Hobbit, and then was excited to dive into the Silmarillion, but could not make head or tails of it, and so I gave up on it. But I want to give my take on the way to approach it so that you can dive into it successfully, even the first time. So to start out with, we can talk about the top level stories that are included in the Silmarillion, and there's quite a few. It starts all the way with the beginning of the creation of the universe and the Valar, which are the equivalent of like angels in Tolkien's universe. So we go back all the way to creating everything around Middle Earth and everything that encompasses it. There's the rebellion of Melkor included in the Silmarillion as well. So Melkor is one of the Valar, but like Satan in the Bible, Melkor is going to rebel and causes a lot of the events that follow. There's also accounts of the arrival of the elves after creation of the world. The idea is to populate it, and so the elves are the ones that come first. The dwarves are actually created first, but then wait for the arrival of the elves, because the elves are meant to be the first to come to the world. There's the tale that the Silmarillion is titled after, which is Fëanor and the Silmarils. So Fëanor creates these three jewels from the light of the two trees that exist, and then captures that, puts a lot of effort in his, essentially his soul, I guess you would say, into it, and creates those. And then the story follows. What happens is that Melkor steals them, and then Fëanor and his sons swear an oath that causes a lot of the subsequent actions. There's also tales of the arrival of men in Middle Earth. The Tale of Turin, so this is the tragic. There's many tragedies in Silmarillion. Turin is, according to Tolkien, the greatest tragedy. Has a horrible story of his life and everything bad that kind of happens to himself and people who are around him. There's the story of Gondolin, the hidden city in Middle Earth, another tragedy as well. And then Eärendil in the War of Wrath. So Eärendil is going to plead to the Valar to come and help Middle Earth. And so there's that story included as well. There's also the Akalabeth, which is the creation and fall of Númenor, a great story included. This is the Second Age in Middle Earth. And then a brief summary of the Third Age in the Rings of Power, that if you've read The Hobbit and the Lord of the Rings, then you know that age, and there's a brief summary of that age as well. So like I mentioned, the Silmarillion is a mythology. It's not a narrative story, and so it doesn't have that cohesive storyline that you would expect from a usual book, a novel. And instead it has many separate storylines that are brief and told in a abbreviated way. They overlap, but they're all happening sometimes at the same time, but they're all somewhat disconnected, and yet all collected into this one book. It's a lot like the Bible, you could say, or other books of faith, or more closely in mythology. It's a lot like a collection of myths, and because of that, it's closer to a reference book than a story. So reading it, you can imagine you wouldn't read the dictionary or an encyclopedia like you would a regular story, and this is the critical difference between them. So the advice I would give is approach it like that, like a collection of shorter stories. Look at the chapter headings and understand. You can even use Google to understand what each of them cover. And if you feel bogged down with any particular story, it's completely all right to jump to another of the stories. So if you don't like, specifically, say the Silmarillion story, you can go ahead and jump to the story of Turin or any of the other stories and dive in. And you shouldn't really get dinged that much with missing anything. There's a lot of, if you find a Silmarillion with a good reference in the back, say this is an index, this would be a great thing to have, and that way you can be sure that you don't miss any references. It's also okay to put the book down for weeks and months, even years. I put the Silmarillion away for years at a time and then return to it. So like any great book, something like a mythology, it'll be okay to put aside, jump into other books, and then return to it when you're ready. So like I said, when I first tried the Silmarillion, I did approach it like a story. There were not a lot of writings about the Silmarillion at the time. There were some reviews, glowing reviews, saying how great it was, but nothing to say how to approach it. And so that's why I got confused and put it aside at the time. But now I have a really nice hardbound copy, the version with Tolkien's own illustrations in it. And I reference that currently almost every day. I pick it up and find something that I'm interested in and dive into it. So I jump around, just like I mentioned, I'll jump around from part of the Silmarillion to another, just depending on what I'm interested in that day. You might not feel like a particularly tragic part of the story to dive into, so you may look for something a little more uplifting. But another day you may want to dive into something a little deeper. So currently I'm using the book as a reference. I visualize via AI to how I picture the characters and the events and upload those to YouTube, which makes it all that much more fun and real to me. And so you should feel free to do the same thing. Some people may want to write a fan story, a fan fiction around the deeper details that are skipped in the Silmarillion. Since it's a mythology and it skips a lot of the details, you could even pick up a pen and paper and go into greater detail about some story that really compels you from the Silmarillion, or even write a piece of music if there's something that you want to put around that, or make a piece of visual art like I'm doing currently using AI. Or if you're an artist, you can go ahead and knock out a piece of art yourself. And like I said, it's also feel free to put the book away if you've gone into it, you feel like you've gotten everything you can out of it for the time being. Go ahead and put it away. And like the rest of Tolkien's works, it's going to be still compelling at some point later on, I believe. It may be months or years, but you'll probably pick it up again, dive into it, and find something new to get from the Silmarillion at that time. So that is my advice on the Silmarillion. Let me know what you think. I will have another video coming up on another book. So until then, thanks everybody, and take care.